Basically, my story started as a child. I was in a family where there was a lot of arguing, and that became what was normal for me. So I really started to think that that was just how relationships were. And, no fault of my parents, that was what they knew. And we'll talk more about that later. But that was what became the norm. And for some reason, I really wanted to be in a relationship. And I remember in high school, I was like, oh, I'm the only person who's not in a relationship. What's wrong with me? And I really felt there was something wrong with me, that I could not attract anyone, is what it felt like. Like every time I thought I liked someone, they would always like my friend or somebody else, and they never were interested in me. And it started to make me feel a little bit insecure about myself. And I didn't realize how much at the time. Well, when I was 19 years old, I started dating someone, really nice guy to start off, and we got along great. And I thought, hey, you know what? Maybe relationships are better than what I've seen before, and maybe, there's more to it than what I've realized. And we moved in together, and for the first 2 or 3 years, we didn't argue. We had really no issues. And then his father got sick, and he started to just spiral down. And I had this feeling that things were not right, and I even knew at that point that he was not the man of my dreams, and he was not the one that I was meant to be with. But I also had this ingrained feeling, and just ingrained, that I needed to help him. So I stood by him, and I tried to support him as he was going through the loss of his father. His father got very sick. He had lung cancer, and then he ended up passing away. And so for a few years afterwards, I was still trying to hold on to the person that I had originally started dating. And we lasted for about 7.5 years. And those last 2 years were just really, really terrible. And I just remember feeling like I was drowning, like I was just overwhelmed, that there was just so much going on. And I didn't know what to do to help him, because I knew what he could be. And I was hoping that he would go back there. But towards the end, I was noticing, there's just not much that I can do. So I decided to break it off with him. And it wasn't just for something simple. It was, the police were called. They came at 2:00 in the morning, after he got home, I guess, right about that time, accusing me of cheating on him, took my phone, called friends I was with, and then threw my phone across the room and broke it. And my friend was smart, and she decided to call the police, and the police came to my house. It was the first time they had come, and I was pretty embarrassed that the police were there. But as the police escorted him out and made him leave, because he ripped me out of bed, ripped my pajamas. I mean, it was a really horrific, yelling, screaming, cursing, really terrible scene. And, the police officer, they were taking him away, and one of them stopped and said, listen, you're 27 years old. These are the best years of your life. Please don't stay. Don't do this. And I was like, wow, that's really, thank you. I was really appreciative of that police officer for standing back and saying that to me. So I decided to break up with him. And for the next few months, I was stalked. I was harassed. I had to get an order of protection to keep him away. I was getting about 30 or 40 phone calls a day. And the piece of me that felt really guilty was feeling really bad about all of it. I was like, oh my God, I left him when he needed me. And I felt really awful that I had left him when here he was feeling the grief from losing his father. And here I was able to leave, and I felt really bad about it. And I didn't know how much that was affecting me until later on. So I tried to continue on. I pushed through the crazy phone calls, and I was calling the police, and they were coming, and it was orders of protections and all these different things going on, and just really crazy stuff happening. And I started dating again. And as I was dating, I was like, oh, I got this. I know who I am. I'm a strong, independent woman. And every person that I dated in between there had something going on. It started to really get to the point where I started to question if it was me. Am I doing this to people? It was just, oh, these great guys, and I make them crazy. That was actually what I started to feel like. And so we went out for my 28th birthday, and one of my friends brought a friend, and I felt really comfortable with him. He was a good-looking guy, smart, and I felt really comfortable with him. So we started talking, and very quickly started dating, became exclusive. My friend tried to warn me, but I didn't want to believe it. I thought he had some kind of ulterior motive to warning me about his friend. He said, date anyone, just don't date my best friend. I was like, he's best friends with him. It can't be that bad. So I felt pretty safe. Well, there was a reason why he was warning me. Few months in, things were not going so well. We had an argument in public, and I just remember leaving that and saying, you know what, this is a red flag. I probably should leave this relationship. He was very jealous. And I thought about it, we talked about it, and the way he explained it, I was the one that was at fault. I was the one who was not respectful of him when we were out in this public place. He had met someone and I didn't introduce him properly, and it was my fault that he was so angry. And because I had never been in a healthy relationship, I wanted to believe him. So I was like, you know what? Maybe this is the guy. He loves me. He's maybe the one who's teaching me what I need to know. I guess I'm just going to listen to what he said. And even though I had that red flag, that gut instinct, I ignored it and I continued to date him. Well, things progressed and he asked me to marry him, and he wanted to move in. And I actually had told him, I'm very uncomfortable with you moving in. I had a really bad experience with my ex-boyfriend. I'm not really sure if I want you to move in. And he really pushed it. I want to move in. If we're going to be married, I might as well move in. It's just easier that way. And again, red flag, gut instinct. I shouldn't have let him move in, but I did. So there were some things that went on. He left me places. He was starting to not say the nicest things to me. And here I was preparing for a wedding, and I was starting to have a lot of red flags. And people were saying to me, well, you know, a lot of people are stressed out while they're, preparing for a wedding. It's pretty normal. A friend of mine gave me some really great advice by saying, everyone's got shit. It's just whose shit you want to deal with. And I was like, all right, well, my dad had a bit of a temper. I get it. The possibility of him is great. And, I'm going to just stick by it, and things are going to get better. Once we get married, things are going to get better. So, and again, of course, if it went better, then we wouldn't be here right now. So, we get closer to the wedding. Things are really it's really a lot of turmoil. There's not so great stuff going on. And we get to the wedding, and we got married at a place called Ohiga Castle, which is in Long Island, is one of the most beautiful places to get married at. I actually had wanted to get married at my parents' house in North Carolina on the beach, and he wanted a big Long Island wedding. And so he really wanted it. He wanted to show off, and he knew people. And so I said, you know what, how silly am I that I don't want this beautiful, like, princess fairy tale wedding, because it really is that gorgeous of a place. So we're at this beautiful place. We get married. We have all this family from all over the world, realistically, because my mom is from France. So we have family from everywhere, and they all came to wish us well for our wedding. It was the most beautiful day of my life. I mean, everything was perfect. It was so wonderful. And then the wedding night happened. And we went back to the hotel room, which was at the castle. We had a beautiful suite. I mean, this suite was probably the size of my house. I mean, was a huge honeymoon suite. And we go into the room, and I was wearing this beautiful corseted dress, and I had a different vision, of course, of how the night was going to go. And I asked him to undo my corset, and he said, okay, well, I'm going to go run the bath. So he went and ran the bath, and then he undid my corset, and we kissed a little bit and whatever. Then we went into the bathroom, and so I'm naked, and I am trying to get into the bathtub. And when I get into the bathtub, I stick my foot in the tub, and some water trickles over the side and lands on the ground. And he says, just like you, Stephanie, you're always making a mess. You don't care about anything, and goes on. And I said, whoa, honey, let's not ruin the night. Well, those were some famous last words, because that just started him on a temper that progressed and continued for the next 3 or 4 hours, where I was chased around the hotel suite, chased around. I couldn't go anywhere because, remember, I'm naked. I was thinking about how I wanted to go into the hallway to find safety, and I was afraid and I was embarrassed because, well, he knew people there, and I didn't want to be naked in the hallway. And so I really just didn't know what to do. There was another room in the suite. I locked myself in the suite. He was banging on the door trying to get in. I had my body up against the door so that he couldn't break down the door, and my heart's pounding in my chest, and I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to call. I don't have my phone with me because, again, I'm naked. And he starts trying to sweet talk me a little bit and saying, hey, just get out. We can talk about this. So finally I'm like, okay, fine. So I get out, and starts cursing at me, threatening me, running around again. He follows me into the bedroom and throws me onto this beautiful 4-post bed. I'll always remember those 4 posts, this gorgeous room. He throws me onto the bed and starts strangling me. And I remember looking at him and thinking to myself, here's the man that I chose to marry, and he's going to kill me on my wedding night. And as I started to struggle and try to get him away, I started to feel my arms get weak and my legs get weak. And I stopped struggling. I couldn't do it anymore. And I started to give up. And I was like, I'm going to die. He's going to kill me. And he stopped. He got off of me. He walked away and he looked to the ground. And it was like a veil had been lifted off of him. And it was like he came to. And has anyone in here that's watching, have you ever been with someone who's that enraged? I feel like there's like a darkness that goes over their eyes. And there was a darkness there. And it was lifted after he came to. And he looked at me and just started saying, you know, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I was so stressed out from the day. And all I'm thinking is, I need to call the minister and tell him not to put through the marriage certificate. Like, I can't be married to this man. And then I start thinking about all of the friends and family that had spent all this money to come to my wedding and all these things that, you know, I'm 29 years old, and 29 felt so old at that time. I'm 40 now. I'm like, wow, 29 was so young, but I felt like I'm 29 years old. I need to deal with this. And I didn't really know what to do. And so, of course, he's a great salesman, and he started to pick up on all those fears that I was having. And he started saying, hey, you know, all those people, they came, and what are they going to say? And he was really, you know, kind of using that and ended up saying, hey, listen, we're supposed to be going on our honeymoon starting tomorrow. We were supposed to be leaving at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So we had about an hour. So there was no sleep that was going on. And, you know, he started trying to talk me into, please, please, please let's stay married. Let's work it out. I promise this will never happen again. So we went on the honeymoon. I was talked into it, and I allowed myself. And after a few days on the honeymoon, I was like, all right, okay, this is better. This is the guy that I know. This is the guy that I fell in love with. And so we had a few months that were just bliss. Like it was wonderful. And I was like, all right, maybe I started to feel a little bit more comfortable. And of course, as time went on, he started losing his temper again. And so for the next 5 years, I was woken up in the middle of the night. I remember 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, him taking a drawer full of stuff, jumping it on the floor, turning the light on in my room and pulling the sheets off of me, saying, clean this shit up off the floor. And I was like, I'm trying to sleep. I have work tomorrow. And he was like, well, it's the junk drawer. I need you to clean it at 3 o'clock in the morning, because it was something that was bothering him. And I was pushed, I was spit on, I was threatened, I was cursed at. I was told over and over again that I needed to shut up and no one needed to hear from me. And my self-esteem started to go much further down. And I started to feel like I was not myself anymore. And I just was walking on eggshells all the time. And I was afraid to really be myself. And when I would tell him, you know, I really have a hard time telling you anything, he's like, well, you need to get over it. You know, you shouldn't feel that way with me. And I was like, well, how can I not? You know, how could I not feel that uncomfortable around you? And so when his moments of clarity, he would tell me some information, and then he'd go back to being the person that he was. And that's very typical of people who are in abusive relationships, is that cycle. You know, it doesn't stay bad all the time. So time went on, 5 years. I had thrown him out of the house. Police were called several times. You know, just a really uncomfortable situation. There were times I would come home and I just would turn around and leave again. I actually had a place, I called it my crying place, where I would go to a dock, and I would just cry for sometimes an hour or 2 hours, and just cry and cry and cry. I would come home and I would just never feel safe. I never felt comfortable. And one day I decided, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, listen, I really think that I am ready to be done with this relationship. I can't do this anymore. And she said to me, listen, if you ever decide that you want to leave, come and live with me. My house is always open for you. So I said, okay. So I'd been driving around with a bag, a duffel bag with all of my stuff, some change of clothes, important, my marriage certificate, important information. I'd been taking money and putting it on the side so that if I did have to leave in a hurry, I would be able to leave. And I went to my second job on a Saturday. It was actually Cinco de Mayo. And I went there, and all of a sudden I got a text message from my ex-husband who said that he'd quit his job. Now, I was the sole breadwinner, and he was working and going back to school, and I was pretty much taking care of all the household, everything. And he was supposed to be paying me money, and he hadn't been. And this was supposed to be a big paying day, and I was really excited that he was going to hopefully be able to give me some money this time. And I said, listen, honey, go back there and please, and I'm text messaging because I'm at work, text messaging, please, honey, go back and try to get your job back. Because, tell them that you lost your temper, tell them you apologize, but please go back. And his response was, just like typical cunt bitch Stephanie, not to respect her husband. And now, over those 5 years, I'd gotten used to, favorite words were cunt, whore, bitch. Those were the favorite words. I heard those all the time. And for some reason that day, I thought, here I am working extra hours to keep a roof over our head and food on the table, and he quit his job because he didn't like the attitude that his boss gave him. And I'm the one who has to stress out about it. And I said, you know what? I'm done. And I sent a text message to my friend and said, listen, is that offer still open? Because I'd like to come and live with you. And she agreed. So I went and lived with her for a few months and dealt with the whole divorce process. And it was, again, not easy. I got another person that was harassing me and stalking me and threatening me and just doing everything he could to manipulate to come back into my life. And if you've ever gotten to that point where you're done, I was done. That was it. And so I just, no matter what he said, I was not allowing myself to go back there. Things got worse before they got better. About a year after that, I was trying to work on myself and take care of myself. And my grandmother passed away. I'd gotten into some legal issues. I had started dating a guy who ghosted me, so just completely disappeared. So this went back to my feelings of, I do this to guys, there's something wrong with me. So I was completely feeling alone, and I got a blood clot in my arm. And the doctor said, you need to not move, you need to just stay seated and not move around too much because it could kill you. And I was thinking, oh my God, this could be the end. Here I've had just all these terrible relationships, and this could be the end of my life, that I would have wasted all of my time in these awful relationships. And I went downhill, and I fell into a depression. I felt my chest was heavy. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't eat. I lost at least 20 pounds. I was having a hard time going to work and just having regular conversations with people. I couldn't eat. I would go to work, come home, put on my pajamas, and just lay in bed in the fetal position, not able to really do anything. I was having a hard time communicating with friends. My friends were like, I've never seen you like this before. I don't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do for myself. I was just so lost, and I was so depressed. And I was like, oh, someone help me. And all I kept thinking is, someone help me. Someone come save me from this, because this is awful. And so this was the end of the year. The new year happens, and 2-3 days into the new year, I wake up and I have pink eye. And I'm like, pink eye, really? 3 days later, I'm at work and I sprained my ankle. And I go to the emergency room to get my ankle looked at, and I was at work, so who did they call? Because who was on my emergency list? My ex-husband. So here he was at the hospital as I have this swollen ankle that's 3 times the size. And I look around and I say to myself, all right, universe, I get it. I need to make changes. And I start kind of laughing as I'm crying and just don't even know what to do with myself. And at that moment, that was my aha moment. And I realized that I needed to be my own savior, my own knight in shining armor. So I decided to start really working on myself and doing everything that I could to reconnect with myself and figure out what it was that had gotten me to this place. So here we are. I'm going to start with the first step of what you can use to start making your best life, because these are the steps that I used, and I'm just going to tell you that I am now happily married to my best friend. I have a beautiful 2-year-old son, and I am pregnant with baby number 2, a little girl due in October. So this life would not be available to me had I not taken those steps. I would have still had my crying place. I would have still had that feeling of not being good enough. I still would have had that feeling of loss and not being married to my best friend, of being home and not being comfortable, had I not taken these steps. So if this is resonating for you, I would definitely write these down. And sometimes they feel obvious, but you need to be reminded of them. So the first step that we're going to talk about today is figuring out how you got here. And that is something that's a really big one. What my ex-husband had told me at one point when we were married, that I was codependent, and I got really offended by it. I was like, I'm not codependent. And I was like, I got really angry, and he was right. That's actually the only reason why I was with him. So now for anyone who's new to codependency and they don't know what that is, let me just kind of explain it to you in a very quick and easy way. Codependency is where you are taking more care of the other person and their problems than they're taking care of them and their problems. So here's an example. You are with an alcoholic and you're worried about them drinking and driving, and you say to them over and over again, hey, I really, really need you not to drink and drive. It scares me. And the alcoholic says, okay. And then they go out drinking till all hours of the night, every single time. And you're up worried, you're calling, they don't come home that night, you're freaking out. Sometimes they call you for a ride, sometimes they don't. Then the next day you talk to them about it, you try to explain to them how they behaved was so bad and how hurtful it was, and they say, okay, and they do it all over again. And you stay. So what I want to make sure that you understand is one of the things that when I did actually start therapy and my therapist said to me, hey, you're codependent. I was like, hey, that's what my ex-husband said. What's wrong with you? I was offended because I thought that meant, hey, this is your fault that this person treated you badly. And I don't want you to think that at all, because this is not how that person treated you is their problem. It's not because you're not good enough. It's not because you're not capable. It's not because you're not a beautiful person. It's because that person is messed up. And who do these messed up people like to attract, and who do they like to manipulate? People who are caretakers, people who are empaths, who take care of other people. And so I want you to really keep that in mind, that when I'm saying codependent, it doesn't mean that you are broken. Yes, you need work, and yes, you need help, and yes, you need some assistance, but that doesn't mean that it's your fault that the things that happen to you. All right. So I just want to make sure that is as very clear. So that's codependency. Now, what are some of the reasons why people become codependent? Well, there's a few different reasons, and you can figure out what your reasons are for staying in these unhealthy relationships. And this is something that's going to be the deep work, is figuring this out. Because once you can figure out where this came from, you can start to really move forward. So here's what codependency used to be called. It used to be specifically labeled for children of alcoholics and drug addicts. That's actually how it started. Melody Beattie, who talks a lot about Codependence No More, she's done a lot of really great work. That was actually in the beginning, they were looking at children of alcoholics. Well, as time went on, they realized it's not just children of alcoholics or drug addicts. It is children who have had to be adults before their time. So it can be the loss of a parent. It can be that they were really severely bullied. It could be that, their parents were arguing a lot. For me, and one of the reasons why I wrote my book, Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt, I really felt that love was anxiety provoking and caused pain and discomfort. Now, why anyone would want to be in love, if that's what love felt like, who knows, but that's how I felt. And some of you might understand what that feels like. I didn't understand that love was supposed to be calm and peaceful and, not always bring joy, but just feel a calmness and a safety in that love. I hadn't felt that before. That's not what love was to me before. So when things were not going right, well, that's what love is. That's what I know it to be. And so, having that family dynamic where there's dysfunction, where there's a lot of arguing and discord and things like that. Obviously, drugs and alcohol are definitely a part of it. And some people, I've spoken to some people that were in unhealthy relationships, and they said, I had an amazing upbringing. I had my parents were together and they were great and they did everything right. And they had this feeling of wanting to help people, and, they didn't realize they didn't understand where it came from. Another thing I want to kind of add on to that is for those people, especially if you were brought up in a religious household, your parents might have gotten along very well, things might have been great, but if you were brought up in a religious household, and I was brought up in a religious household, once you get married, you stay married. And that was something that was ingrained in me from the time I was a small child. So even though things were not right in my relationship and other relationships previous, you didn't let people down. You stuck by them because that's the promise that you made by being in a relationship with them. And again, because my upbringing was relationships are work and they're very difficult, I was just used to it. Like, okay, I'll just deal with it. I'm going to take care of it. It's going to get better tomorrow. It's not always going to be this bad. So I knew that it was not going to stay that bad. Of course, the longer I stayed, the longer those bad periods lasted. But I knew that at some point it would get better because that's what my experience had been. So, it could be a variety of those things. In fact, sometimes it's all of those things together. Maybe you had bullying as a child. Maybe you had the loss of a parent. Maybe before the parent passed away, maybe there was a lot of arguing. Maybe there was, other kind of dysfunction. Maybe there was abuse. There could be a long, long list of things. And I think, for me, it was definitely a combination of family of origin, so the family that I was brought up with, what I thought love felt like. It was my promise to God that I would be with my husband forever. It was my own self-esteem. I didn't realize that I was so insecure in myself and who I was. I wasn't strong and a full person yet before I started dating someone else, and we're going to talk more about that in the next 2 days. So that was another big issue. And then I think to kind of add on to that, this society that we live in now seems to think that unhealthy relationships are the norm. And how do I know that? Watch television, listen to music, listen to other people's conversations about their relationships, even commercials. Commercials show like husbands as like these, blubbering idiots. How can they get anything done? So you just start you don't realize these subconscious feelings that are going on that are driving you. They're limiting beliefs. They're a belief system that's BS, a belief system, right? They're not real, but it's what we've gotten ingrained into our brains. Turn on the radio. The song is there's a song that I kind of revert to all the time. It's called In the Middle. The singer's called Zed, I think is what it is. The song's on the radio all the time, and I try to turn it off because I can't listen to it. But part of the song is about, we lost our temper and we threw dishes at each other, and now we just got to try to figure it out, and we've got to be together. Those are the kinds of songs, those are the kinds of things that we are teaching people that that's what's normal. And so the more we think that's normal, the more we say, hey, things in my life are not going so great, but it seems like everybody else is in these unhealthy relationships. So you know what? I don't want to be too picky. I just want to deal with it. I'm supposed to get married and have children and, follow all these rules. And so we kind of get stuck in it. So one of the things that I would like you to do is to journal that question. How the heck did I get here? And I want you to, as best you can, to really start digging deep and saying, hey, where did these original feelings come from? Where is that background, that subconscious limiting belief coming from that is making me choose the wrong people over and over again? Because I'm going to tell you also that if you do not do the right work, you are going to continue to attract those same people over and over again. And of course, me doing this webinar and me doing all the things that I do with codependency, my hope and my passion is to not have anyone do this over again. I'm hoping that by the time you get all this great information, you're going to learn and say, hey, I feel that red flag. I've got that gut feeling. I've got all those good tools that I now have learned. I am going to use those to not ever have to do this over again. So that is my goal for you. All right, so journal the things that we talked about. And, again, whatever comes up for you, if you want to start journaling even now, because you're like, oh my gosh, she just brought up so much great information. I really just want to start writing. So start writing, whatever you're feeling. And if this resonated for you, please let me know. I would love to see in the comments, whatever information that you maybe even want to add to what I just shared. So that was number one. Number two, build your support team. Support team and figuring out how you got here might be kind of at the same time. So, and if you do one before the other, that's fine too. But they're kind of simultaneous. So building that support team is super, super, super important. Because if you're like me, what we do is that we keep going back. When that person tries to bring us, they kind of reel us back in. Hey, baby, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. You're the most amazing person. They put you up on this platform and they make you feel so good when they're feeling like they want to get something out of you. And that's part of something that actually happens is the manipulation. And actually, one of the things I wanted to say from before is that shame and guilt are two of like the most popular things that are used in these kind of unhealthy toxic relationships. So like, let's say, I'm going to say man versus woman just because I'm a female. So just so if you're a guy, this is not anything against you. I'm just saying from a female perspective and from my own perspective. What a lot of people like to do is they feel insecure. So what do? They make you feel bad so that they can feel better. And as much as that sounds terrible, my ex-husband, when he had his moments of clarity, he would tell me that he would project. Because there were times where he was doing exactly what he was accusing me of, and I would look at him like, oh my God, this is exactly what you're doing, and you're accusing me of it. And in his moments of clarity, he realized that that's what he was doing. Part of that shame and manipulation and that guilt is to try to make you feel worse about who you are to make them feel better, and it gives them power and control. So keep that in mind. That's part of what they do. So with this support system that you're going to create, when that person tries to reach out to you, they're going to remind you, hey, no contact. You need to have no conversations with this person because remember, this is how it goes, and they can remind you what it is. How things have happened before. Sometimes we forget. We want to, we think, well, it wasn't all bad. It wasn't always so terrible. There was good times too. I wasn't such a great person either in the relationship. And those are all those questioning things, again, where we're not secure in ourselves, that we allow that person to keep bringing us in. Hey, well, maybe they're right. There's things that I could do better. There's things that I could do differently. And I can tell you that if it's this much work and this much drama, this is not the man of or woman of your dreams. It is not. Again, calm, peaceful, relaxed. That's the person of your dreams. So just keep that in the back, keep reminding yourself that feeling in your chest of calmness and relaxation when you're with that person. So who else should be on your support team? Friends are great. I love having friends as being part of your support team. However, just make sure that these friends are not in toxic, unhealthy relationships or giving you advice that is not healthy. Because what happens is if you have friends that are also in bad relationships, their advice is going to be completely wrong. You should not be listening to people who are not where you want to be. And that's really, really important to keep in mind because so often we'll call up one of our friends and say, hey, they did this, he did this, she did this, whatever. And then all of a sudden they're agreeing and trying to come from another perspective. And, it's not necessarily helpful. So I recommend everyone, I don't care if you're codependent, I don't care if you are in toxic relationships, I don't care if you feel like you're in the best place of your life. Everyone at some point in their life should talk to a therapist. And so I really strongly recommend talking to a therapist. And that therapist can also kind of help you figure out if you're having a hard time, how did I get here? That therapist can help you really dig deep. Because having that outside perspective of someone else that has no vested interest in you, you're paying them, you're working with them. And if you don't like them, don't feel like you need to stay with them. You actually can shop around for your best therapist. So you're not stuck with a therapist. When I was looking for my therapist, I remember, I think I had, I want to say like 7 or 8 therapists, and there were some not great ones at all. Some that were bad. There was one that wanted to put me on some like crazy psychoactive medication, which was not what I needed. I just needed to talk to someone. So be very careful and be choosy with who you choose as your therapist. You can speak to your health insurance or call a local crisis hotline if you're worried about the charge for a therapist. But get a therapist to start you through the process so they can be that friend as you go through. So friends, therapist. Some people, I did not use this, but I know that for a lot of people, Al-Anon or CODA meetings, Codependence Anonymous, there are, you have the ability to join those kinds of organizations online if you're having trouble getting to actual meetings, or you can go to meetings. Having other people share their story helps you realize that you're not the only one going through it. Of course, my group, I have a few groups that I run, so you can always be in those groups and have that support in those. They're free groups, so you can join those as well. But making sure that you have those support groups are really, really important. I'm going to add that for me, meditation was really important because again, that looking within, and that was supportive for me, and that I was able to reconnect with myself through meditation and yoga. Yoga was, and we'll talk about self-care also, and that can be part of it too. But yoga is being that mind-body connection, the breathing. There were times where I would go to yoga and I would just have like a tear going down my face, and I'm like, why am I even crying? I don't really know why I'm so upset. And it was because I was letting all this emotion out. And kind of you get that community of other people that are there as well, and you can start to kind of form friendships. Because one of the things that I notice a lot is that people that are in these unhealthy relationships have lost their friendships. So you might be lucky enough that you have some friends left and you do have those people to reach out to. But like for me, I had to get rid of a lot of friendships because we had mutual friends and I wanted to stay no contact. So, starting to like find that new group, that new tribe of people, and I'm going to be talking more about tribe and how to find that through the next few days. But finding that new tribe to help be a support network, because think of this as your dream team. Think about the best. I'm not really into sports, but I know for a fact that if you have a number one sports team, they've got a good dream team together. Those are some people that work really, really well together. You need that for you, because the reality is that you can't do it on your own. If you could, you would have done it already. I thought I could do it on my own. So instead of doing it one time, I did it over and over and over again because I can handle it myself. Find that good support team that's going to help you to grow and move forward, because you can't do it by yourself. You don't know how to do it properly, have healthy relationships properly, have healthy boundaries properly, because you can see the results of what you have. And if you're in a place where you're not happy and you're in a relationship or you're out of a relationship and you're seeing the patterns over and over again of these unhealthy relationships, you're not doing it right. Because again, I will remind you that a healthy relationship is actually a really wonderful place to be. And that, of course, starts with your relationship with yourself. So I know that there are, Jennifer, crying from yoga releases. Yeah, definitely. So, I know if there's any questions that you have, that's basically the 2 tips that I wanted to share with you tonight. I really hope that you tune in again tomorrow and Friday, because we're going to dig even deeper. There's so much information that I want to share. But again, like I said, I didn't want to keep you on for very long. I said no more than an hour, and I'd like to keep, in integrity and keep it to that. But I would, if you have any questions, now is the time to ask me those questions, because I do not want you to continue these patterns over and over again. I really, people are like, why do you do this? And I do this because I remember what it was like in my crying place. I remember what it was like feeling like I was alone. I remember sitting there and saying, is there more to life than this? Is this what I'm going to be doing when I die? Is I'm going to be dealing with this for the rest of my life, and crying to myself that this is what life was, and watching life pass me by and people that seem to be happy. My ex-husband would say to me, you just think that people are all lollipops and rainbows. Well, I can tell you now that when I'm on the other side, it is. It actually is lollipops and rainbows. So you just have to get through the work, and it's not easy. It took you a lot of time to get here. It's going to take some time and some effort. And if you're willing to put in the time and effort, I am more than willing and more than happy to help you through the process to get you to the other side, to where I'm at, because it's a beautiful place over here. And I really want you over here, because you know what? You living your best life actually helps everybody else. And if you have kids, that's going to keep your kids from experiencing the same crap that you've had to deal with if you start making changes now. All right, so Jennifer says, I was about to ask, what is a good first step to believe you're worth caring about? Oh, hold on here. And I just realized this is, yeah. Well, I'm glad. And this is exactly what it is. The fact that you're on this, watching this right now, you know, there's that little feeling inside of you that knows that there's more. And it is. And sometimes it's all that it takes is that little spark. You know, for me, again, when I got that divorce, I was like, you know what? I might just be alone for the rest of my life. But I know for a fact that I do not ever want to do this again, because I will never be in a relationship like this ever again. And if this is what relationships are like, then I will just be single for the rest of my life. And that little bit of hope, that little bit of possibility, that spark that was there, that gut feeling that knew there was something else out there, is what pushed me through and got me, you know, exactly this, is that little bit of like, ooh, let me try this. Ooh, let me try that. Those moments when I was depressed and laying in bed and couldn't move, there was that hope. Okay, this too shall pass. Something will change. This will get better. There's the possibility of change. And I'll tell you what, when I was single, I loved being single. It was the first time ever as a 35-year-old woman that I loved being single. And I'll share more about my story, you know, as we go in the next 2 days. But it was a great time, and I really was prepared for that to just be my life. Fine, I'll just be single for the rest of my life, and I'll be okay with that. So you'll get there. You definitely will. All right, so Kim says, please, I need help with everything. Where do I start? I do feel like I'm missing me. I want me back, laughing and happy. You'll get there. So definitely tune in tomorrow and Friday. I definitely empathize. I really know exactly, well, not exactly, but I really can understand where you're coming from, Kim, because I remember that same thing. I remember actually one day I spoke to my therapist, and I said, you know, I remember when I was in my 20s and I thought the world was full of possibilities. And I thought that when people talked about, you know, as you got older, that people just became less enthused about life. And I kind of just felt like that was maybe just what it was, as I was getting older and I just wasn't as excited. No, the reality is that I had suppressed my excitement. I loved to travel, and my ex-husband loved to go out to dinner and spend a lot of money that he didn't have. So we were in debt, and I wasn't traveling. I didn't travel for 5 years. And that is a passion, a deep-seated need and passion for me. And I remember I love like great debates and great conversations and meeting new people. But when you're told over and over again that you need to stop talking so loud and nobody wants to hear you be the center of attention, and, you know, that you're fake and whatever, you know, whatever horrible things that someone can say to kind of start just slowly bringing you down, I wasn't laughing as much. I wasn't happy as much because I was in such a bad place. But you'll get there. You're going to, you know, start taking these steps, start working. Again, you're just for being here and watching this, you're taking the steps in the right direction. So you'll get there. And again, it takes time. I was, I'm trying to think, it was about a little over 3 years where I had to do a lot of work on me before I was able to really figure out who I was. And, you know, ultimately ended up attracting the right partner for me. And definitely I had a list, and we'll talk more about it, but I had my list, but I was not going to settle for anything, no matter what people would say, like, oh, you're, you know, being too picky. People can be picky about their pizza and their shoes. They sure as hell better be picky about who they're in a major relationship with, and we're not. So you deserve wonderful. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve to be loved and cared for and held and have that support without being treated badly and without feeling bad about who you are. Because anyone who tries to make you feel bad about who they are, it's completely about them. It's them trying to bring you down and make you feel bad about yourself. I took the words right out of your mouth. Yeah, so little steps at a time. And like I said, tune in because we're going to be talking a lot more about actually exactly the questions that you're asking about, Kim. In fact, I don't remember if that's tomorrow or Friday off the top of my head. Tune in though to both days because I think you're going to get some really great information. So are there any other questions? I'm trying to look at the time. It's about 9:50. So I'm keeping in integrity. I'm keeping into that time frame that I was looking for. If there are any other questions, I know there's a little bit of a lag, so feel free to ask questions. Again, if you're watching this on a recording, please feel free to ask the questions anyway. I do check very frequently on Facebook, so I will be able to go back and answer whatever questions that you have. Good, I'm glad, Kim. But, it's funny because in losing myself, I found myself. And this was my calling, was to help people. And I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking about it. But as much as there was anger and that fear and all of those things that happened at that time, the other side is an amazing place. And, to have that purpose and that knowledge that I can help people get there just is good. It's a good feeling to know how great things can be if we do the right work. So Jen, thank you so much. And thanks so much, Kim. And there's other people watching, but for some reason I didn't see who else signed in. So if I didn't say hi to you, hi. And thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you again on Thursday and again on Friday, and then sharing some more great stuff that I have for you. All right. So have a great Wednesday night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.